So Dr. Jennifer Tufts was one of the treating physicians, one of the treating psychiatrists that worked with Lindsay directly. She took the stand. She was on there for quite some time. A lot of people have a lot of divided opinions about her. Getting a case like this so fresh out on your own is a 1 in a million type situation, right? It's almost like this situation where these SSRIs just did not mesh with Lindsay. Hello, Sofa Squad, and welcome back to the sofa. That's the sofa we talk about. My name's Paul if you're new here. If you're not new here, we like to change my name up to keep it a little bit fresh. So we're going to go with Teddy today. Dr. Tufts, Teddy, it just has a little bit of a ring to it. Now, what I want to also do is go over a quick little overview of this case, as well as who is Jennifer Tufts, who took the stand. And we'll go into all that to get on the same page so that we can review it together. So go ahead and fill your coffee cup up, grab your true crime blankie, and let's get into today's video. In January of 2023, emergency crews rushed to the Clancy home in Duxbury, Massachusetts. So it's after Patrick Clancy returned home to a scene that no parent should ever have to witness. Inside the basement, the couple's 3 children, 5-year-old Cora, 3-year-old Dawson, and 8-month-old Callan had been fatally strangled. Now, prosecutors will allege that Lindsay used exercise-resistant bands to kill each of them while Patrick was out picking up takeout food and prescription medication. Afterward, Lindsay attempted to take her own life by cutting herself and jumping from a second-story window. It was an act that would leave her permanently paralyzed. But what's unusual about this trial is that the defense is not arguing that Lindsay didn't take the lives of the children. Instead, the entire case centers on one question. Was Lindsay Clancy legally responsible for her actions, or was she suffering from postpartum psychosis so severe that she could no longer distinguish right from wrong? So Dr. Jennifer Tufts was one of the treating physicians, one of the treating psychiatrists that worked with Lindsay directly, and for quite some bit of time, over 14 different appointments. She took the stand. She was on there for quite some time. A lot of people have a lot of divided opinions about her. Let me give you a quick little backstory on her before we talk about the testimony. Dr. Jennifer Tufts is a board-certified outpatient psychiatrist based in Braintree, Massachusetts. She works at Astor Mental Health. She completed her psychiatric residency training in July of 2022 and had only been practicing independently for about a month when she began treating Lindsay Clancy in September of 2022. Over the course of 5 months, from around September 15th, 2022, up until January 23rd, 2023, the day before the tragedy, Dr. Tufts would manage Clancy's care across 14 different appointments. She would diagnose her with generalized anxiety disorder and adjustment disorder with depressed mood while never conducting an in-person physical evaluation, we would find out on the stand. Dr. Jennifer Tufts is also named in a civil lawsuit that both Lindsay and Patrick are taking against not only her, but other entities. Okay, now in the last video we left off at, Jennifer had been on the stand like with the state questioning her, okay? So the weekend came up and then Monday morning, she was going to face the defense and we knew it was going to be rough and she was up there for quite some time. So let's just talk about a few of the highlights from that. So one of the topics of conversation was Zoloft, and that will be a topic of conversation across several of these witnesses that we will see, and the defense will really go in hard on this one. So the defense would review records showing that after Clancy increased her Zoloft dosage, she suffered severe adverse reactions. Now this was, insomnia, nausea, crying spells, paranoia, all the things. Now the dosage that she was supposed to do was 25 milligrams for like a week maybe, and then switching to 50. Now also, Lindsay postponed taking this for a bit because she was concerned about breastfeeding and taking this. Now, just to kind of speak freely of things that I've seen across the internet and whatnot and watching it, and again, I'm not a doctor or anything like that, right? But I've seen a lot of psychiatrists and people like that weigh in on this. And there was a concern of these doctors continuing to prescribe the medications, right? And it's almost like this situation where these SSRIs just did not mesh with Lindsay. And it seems like the Zoloft is being pivoted as a changing moment, an activation, as we keep hearing that word, that triggered something within her. I see some doctors, and this is again like comment section, stuff like that, saying, look, these signs over here should have been recognized with her adverse reaction to Zoloft at the very beginning, and there should have been like a, oh no. Now keep in mind that Lindsay was seeing multiple doctors, right? She was going from here to like this place to this place, not necessarily trying to accuse her at this stage of the game. We don't have all the information yet of, say, doctor shopping, but she was almost going from just a treatment place to a treatment place. She would go to Jennifer and then, think she was going to do better, go home, and I just can't make it. But Jennifer told me about this inpatient program. Let me check myself in here. It felt very erratic. And part of that issue was then she was dealing with several doctors who weren't communicating with each other. And so she just had this smorgasbord of stuff going on. Let's keep talking about some of the other highlights that stuck out to me. So another thing that would come out on the stand is the fact that Lindsay's mother moved in with her to help with the kids. Let's just call it maybe family outreach of some sort. And the defense would really bring this up in regards to like, well, did you ask why the mother moved in, the parents, whatever, and how that was going and what was going on and, why were they doing this, all the things, right? And Dr. Tufts will essentially say, well, no, I wasn't going to question this because number one, the patient has to have agency. She did. Number two, that's not really my place, right? I'm not going to call a parent. I'm not going to call Patrick, outside of the realm of this. Now, another argument that I've seen with people, and not even that, but like comments, is that, okay, well, Dr. Tufts should have been like, hey, Patrick, I need you to join in on the meetings more than you have because I'm seeing some red flags, that I think everybody needs to be involved. But that just wasn't something that Dr. Tufts did. I'm not sure if that would be standard protocol in many situations. We did learn that Patrick was in on like one meeting, but remember this was like telehealth or whatever. And each provider seems to have, maybe not all of them or whatever, but today we listened to Gelada and another person. I'm filming this a day after. Patrick would seem like go to this appointment or that one. He wasn't at every single one. So the lines were a little bit blurry on there. I'm also not sure how that would play out with HIPAA laws and whatnot of Dr. Tufts going around Lindsay and saying, I'm going to call your husband. I could understand where it might be like, she's saying A, B, and C. Maybe I should throw it out there. Hey, do you want your husband to come in with this? But Dr. Tufts will testify that there was nothing sticking out to her that constituted doing something that drastic. Now, another huge thing that would come out is Lindsay reporting like paranoia, those type things, and also having thoughts of taking herself out. Okay. And this would become a very big talking point in this because what we would learn through this testimony, as well as this case in general, is that when Lindsay would report this, it was a blurry line with this because, and I'm not quoting here, but it was almost like this: I'm not having self-harm thoughts in that direction, but I'm getting there, right? And so one of the things that I've seen leave people kind of their mouths on their jaws on the ground is she would go to these places, meaning Lindsay would, and it was like, well, you don't have a plan, so we can't do anything about that yet. So it's kind of like, oh, okay, so I have to have an actual plan. What would I really be telling you at that point, right? It brings up so many questions, okay? But one of the things that came out with Dr. Tufts is that when this, took place, that this wasn't more of a strong, oh my God, drop everything, oh my gosh, you said the S word, that type of reaction to it. Now, again, I look at my own experiences that I've had with psychologists and just the regular doctor. Think about when you go to like your regular doctor, not even a psychiatrist or a psychologist, but you're just your regular doctor and you're doing those forms or whatever. And usually they'll ask you like, okay, we have to ask you this. Do you feel safe at your home? Have you had thoughts of this? All the things, right? It's almost like you just kind of go through it. It's literally to me the same vibe as when you get an airplane, they do the safety stuff and everybody's just kind of whatever. It's just, you go through the motions. And a lot of what we heard with Dr. Tufts seems to feel that way, that what's being put on display is the going through the motions thing and, just going through those, right? Until something bad happens. And that became pretty apparent to me with this type testimony, where it was like, yeah, I always thought that if you said the S word in a doctor setting, even if you were just like, well, I'm not really going to do it, but I'm really, I'm kind of leaning towards those thoughts, that would set off a chain reaction of things. Okay. But that just didn't seem to be the case in this. And it's left a lot of people, especially one thing that I'm seeing with this is people who might not have experience with psychiatrists or psychologists. They're kind of seeing this for the first time and they're just like, this is how like broken the system is, or, it feels like a cattle call, right? And that's very jarring to people. Now, the defense will also bring up this 4-page document. It was like an assessment that's given to somebody who's thinking about taking themselves out, right? And this was by another colleague, Jennifer McAllister, I believe is her name. And the defense will really question Dr. Tufts about this a lot. And Dr. Tufts at first is just like, I wasn't there. I can't speak to that. I wasn't there. That wasn't my thing. And again, I'm not a lawyer, but for me, I was kind of surprised where I was like, why is he asking her about what this other doctor did? And essentially it's like, well, she went through this whole 4-page thing. And even though she's denying this and denying that, and weren't you curious? And how does this work? And it was a little bit of a tussle in the courtroom, right? But again, listening to it, and I try and remain on the middle of the fence with this and take in all the information as if I were a juror, right? And examine the whys behind each of it. And so listening to it, again, I am kind of like, oh, interesting. Okay. So like you can like actually go through with saying, yeah, I'm thinking this or that. And it doesn't really do anything, right? Maybe until it's too late. Now, also another thing that became apparent with this is not just Dr. Tufts, but some of the other psychiatrists and doctors we've seen so far is that, yes, Lindsay seemed to be giving people different answers, and whether that had malicious intent, I don't know if that's the right word behind it. I don't know, because one thing I did with that is I'm like, okay, well, when you're going to different doctors, I even look at my own self and it's like, well, you might feel a certain way one day, and then you might have a certain situation with this doctor over here that doesn't really apply to this one over here. So it becomes very cumbersome. Now, also one of the places that would be up here, South Shore, is where Lindsay's mother-in-law, I believe it was, either worked or works. And we would hear from other psychiatrists from there and whatnot, or doctors, whatever, nurse practitioners. We'll talk about that in a separate video. And so with that, I'm like, well, yeah, are you going to feel comfortable putting your business out there or saying you're having these extreme thoughts and whatnot at a place where like a family member's at? I mean, who knows? Okay. But I think a lot of things went in to factor this. And so that was another thing that really stuck out to me, not just with Jennifer's testimony, but in general, the treating physicians that we've gotten to at this portion of the trial. Now, another thing that was brought up is genetic testing for drug metabolism. Okay, so basically what's going on is the defense is like, well, look, when she's having these reactions, nothing's working for her and this and the other, what about this kind of genome testing or this testing over here and And Jennifer Tufts didn't seem, well, first of all, she said one of the tests was fairly new. It was like 3 years old. I'm not sure if that's accurate or not, but that wasn't something that she really seems to give much weight to. Okay. One of the names of the test that they talk about is some kind of enzyme testing, and I believe it's called cytochrome P450. And again, Jennifer would just kind of not dismiss it, but dismiss it. Okay. Now, I've talked to people in real life who kind of had the same type of experience that Lindsay did, not with the postpartum like depression or psychosis, but trying to get mental health help, having adverse reactions to the drugs to the extent that at one point their psychiatrist was like, I want to do some type of testing. I'm not sure what it is off the top of my head, but it's along this lines of when you just can't seem to jive with the right medication. And so they did some kind of genome testing, some whatever, right? To see like what's up with your system. And they were able to see, oh, wait a second, you need to be on this class of stuff over here. And once they figured that out, it worked really well. Now, I'm not saying that's the same testing that Dr. Tufts did, but I think one thing that has come out that's been of interest is, yeah, well, what happens when a patient presents and nothing seems to work, and we keep trying this and trying that and trying this and trying that, and it's like, at what point do you say, well, yeah, let's test you? Now, again, I wasn't there in the room with them. I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not a doctor, so I can't speak to why that wasn't done or why that wasn't an option. It could be insurance. I think another talking point that's come from this trial is the conversation of how insurance can prevent a lot of things that might need to take place from happening. So we don't know if it covered that or how that would even be. Now, another thing was about the thyroid functioning, and the defense will bring this up and be like, well, no, did you test your thyroid? You know, that controls the hormones and it does this and it does that. And, you know, what about that? And again, Dr. Tufts is like, there was nothing that was presenting in the way that made me feel like I needed to do that, right? And she's basically like, I'm not that kind of doctor, kind of a thing, right? That was just another point that was brought up. One of the things that the defense does, now remember, this is like probably the best defense lawyer you can have for a case like this, right? And so one thing that he does with Jennifer is he really grilled her and asked her questions in multiple ways and multiple times and would really wear her down. And eventually, in my opinion, she got very, passive aggressive, a little bit, not snippy is the word because she's so meek and kind of quiet, but he irritated her after a while, I guess, and like questioning her on these things. Now, keep in mind with Jennifer as well, that even though she did residency and you're seeing lots of patients and you're seeing, this, that, and the other, and blah, 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 and then you get off off on your own, and she had done that for like a month, right? So it's not like she just graduated college and was off on her own. She had been working under someone, most likely very closely. However, on the stand and in a case like this, especially when you're comparing Jennifer with not even colleagues, but other people who are in the lawsuit or, just testifying on behalf of the state or whatever at this point, you can tell the level of confidence that comes with years of practice that Jennifer just doesn't quite have. And she held her own pretty good, but there's just some things that it's like, yeah, when something goes down south, it goes down south. And in this situation, it did. And, who was to say that she would ever know that? I mean, getting a case like this so fresh out on your own is a 1 in a million type situation, right? And I would be curious to see if she has any new things instilled or, I don't know, in place, I should say, about, well, if a patient says this or does this, then we're going to do A, B, or C, and vice versa, right? Now, they'll also talk about some of these more severe thoughts and when they would become more prominent with visits that Lindsay was doing with Dr. Tufts. And keep in mind, these were all done over telehealth. And one of the things that would come up is Dr. Tufts would say something to the effect of, I would provide therapy. And then the defense is like, well, how are you providing therapy in 17 minutes? And Dr. Tufts is like, well, hold on. The 17 minutes was just maybe billed as this, but there was talk therapy over here. And she's like, I would, provide her hope. Sometimes we would talk about, well, here's this other inpatient place you could go to or this situation. And one of the conversations, again, that I'm seeing come up with this and the difference is that's not really being shown too hard or too much in the courtroom is the difference between a psychology or psychologist and a psychology type visit versus a psychiatrist. So remember, psychologists can't write prescriptions, psychiatrists can. Psychiatrists are there for like medication management. Okay. Now I don't have a lifetime of experience with them, but a little bit, right? I've seen a few in my lifetime and it depends on, I can remember one from when I was a kid that it's just, you're going in there for medication, right? That's it. That's what they want to know about, interactions, that kind of thing. They're not there to really provide that. And good ones, like I personally feel like I have now in my life, they'll do this, say, talk therapy, but they're also making sure that my regular stuff that I go do with my psychologist, they're touching base with that. How's that going? What are you talking about? Blah, 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 blah. So it's a combination of things. We would hear from another psychiatrist who seemed to really hone in with Lindsay on this, and that was Julie Paul. And, trying to get Lindsay into a therapist and do that, and you really need to do that. And she came across very sincere. And I'm not trying to say that Jennifer Tufts or Jolada did not, but it was definitely a different vibe with Julie Paul on the stand in that. And I felt like with Jennifer, some of the things that they went over, in just my opinion, was it felt very much like just checking off boxes and, okay, well, we do column A, column B, column C, and that equals this. And I understand that that's a mechanism that they use and you have to, right? But it just seemed to lack a little something. And now one thing that Jennifer will echo, as well as other providers that we've seen, is that they are having to rely on what the patient, in this case, Lindsay, is telling them, right? And they can only go based on that. So if we are getting essentially not correct information, or Lindsay is not disclosing this, or Lindsay is denying this, we can only go based on that, okay? And so a lot of the stuff that we're hearing, Lindsay isn't, according to them at least, she's not saying, I'm hearing voices. She's not saying this and that. It's not as constant. Now, again, if you read the civil lawsuit, which again is just Lindsay presenting her side of the story, it's not evidence, it's not this, it's her version. She is reporting all that kind of stuff all alongside this timeline that Jennifer's talking about. So it leaves you wondering, well, why didn't Jennifer know this? Well, of course, there could be plenty of reasons why. Maybe Lindsay didn't want to get checked in or, committed somewhere. She was already having fears of that. She wanted to go back to work. She doesn't want to lose her license. She doesn't want the kids taken away. Numerous things, right? So if you look at both sides of it coming down the pipeline, you can kind of see this tangled web that's created. Now, another thing that would come up is like undiagnosed bipolar. Okay. And one thing that Reddington, that's the defense attorney, would really go in heavy over is asking Jennifer about like, well, why was she diagnosed with this? Why? Blah, 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 blah. And Dr. Tufts is like, well, I constantly, looked for these signs with her. Was she showing signs of bipolar? Was she showing signs of this mania and this and that? And she lists off the things like, this is what you look for, extreme versions of this, elongated periods of that. And they just weren't present in there to give her this diagnosis. Now, remember, the civil suit is basically saying saying, she wasn't diagnosed properly. They just threw a bunch of drugs at her, this, that, and the other, whatever. So at times it feels like you're almost not only dealing with the trial that's at hand here, but also with the civil suit, right? You're kind of seeing how that might play out on the stand if it ever goes to trial. Time will tell with that. Now, a huge thing that went on in this too is when Reddington is asking Jennifer Tufts, would you be surprised to learn, that famous line we hear in the courtroom, if she was aware that during this time that Clancy admitted to her husband, Patrick, that she was having thoughts of like harming the children. Like, this is escalating. This is getting closer to the end of the year. Remember, the event took place, the murders took place in January, towards the end of January. And Dr. Tufts is like, well, I didn't know that. If I had known that, I would have intervened, see what we needed to do, all the things, right? Now, another thing they'll talk about is Patrick talking to Dr. Tufts. And again, remember, this is telehealth, so it's almost like he kind of stuck his head in type situation. The defense will make sure to say that in that way about, he's frustrated, she's like a zombie. And the word zombie is brought up a lot by the defense and describing the situation that was going on. So that's brought up, and she goes on about that. And again, remember, I might have talked about it, but I'll say it again. At one point, the defense is like, well, why didn't you call Patrick? And why didn't you do this? And, Dr. Tufts is like, it's almost like not my place, right? There's HIPAA and all this stuff, and it just wasn't appropriate in that fashion. And we'll talk about my thoughts on the telehealth thing about this and what came up with that in just a moment, but let's continue on to a couple of things first. Now, another thing that will come up is the McLean visit, and this is where Lindsay does the inpatient place. So this is one of those things that we're learning from her visits with Dr. Tufts, where when things will get to a certain level, Dr. Tufts will be like, well, there is an option that you can go do, A over here, but it's this situation. And Lindsay might be like, oh, I can't do that right now. And then she goes home and she's like, look, this is getting so bad, I'm going to need to check into McLean. So she goes to McLean, right? Now, this is like the turn of the year, okay? So this will be a huge thing that has just caused waves all over the place, TikTok, you name it, whatever. So she will check into McLean, and it's basically a skeleton crew, right? It's the new year. Not many people are there. She spends, I think 4 to 5 days there, whatever. I think she wanted to check herself out. It's one of the kids' birthdays or something. I can't remember what it was. It's something, a situation like that. Long story short, she checks herself out. There's discharge stuff and whatnot. Well, one of the things that the defense will bring up is, well, why didn't you have more follow-up? It was almost like, didn't you have an interest? Didn't you want to find out A, B, and C from this? And why weren't you looking deeper into it? And I think that's interesting because this is where the defense, Reddington, will really go in with some of these providers, and well, you say you care about the patient, but why didn't you have like a natural curiosity to find out A, B, or C? Now, let's talk about some things that came out that were taking place right before the day of the murders. On a January 16th visit, Clancy would feel extremely low, no motivation. She was talking about really feeling forced to bond with her baby. Now, at this point, Dr. Tufts will prescribe a very low dose of amitriptyline. I'm probably saying that wrong. It's an antidepressant. They talk about possible like ketamine treatments. I mean, they're kind of at the rope's end at this point. Now, fast forward to January 23rd, the day before the incident. This is when Lindsay will report feeling numb, emotionless for days and days. She's got a racing heart. She has this, she has that. It doesn't sound good. Now, at this point, she will increase the dosage of amitriptyline and push it up some. So the next day, January 4th, is when the incident takes place, okay? And they'll go in on that and whatnot. Okay, so let's kind of just freely talk for a moment about some of the things, right? So number one, this was 14 visits, remember that, and most of it, well, all of it was telehealth. Now, this is not to say that, I love telehealth myself, depending on what it is, right? Obviously, I'm not gonna do my physical therapy through that with my hip and whatnot, but you know what I'm saying. So for certain things, it's great. And one of the things that the defense will bring out is just that, where he's like, well, why wouldn't you have her come in for A, B, or C? Once like she raised this red flag, why wouldn't you make her come in? And it was like almost kind of like not a real good answer. And I would be curious to know if that policy has changed, right? Now, other doctors we would hear from, other providers and whatnot, I should say, they would talk about like, yeah, we kind of like to have that in-person thing for some things, or this or that, depending on what's going on and whatnot. So, again, every provider is different, every patient is different, every situation is different. And that's one thing that is, our healthcare, our mental health care, all the things. But this is something that the defense will bring up. Now, I saw so many different reactions to Jennifer Tufts' time on the stand across social media, right? And we were talking about this in the live chat. We do live stream the trial on my podcast channel, link down below. And we're talking about that, about, you'll sit here and watch one psychiatrist, as a psychiatrist, this is what I see. And they'll list everything up. She's going to lose her license, the next psychiatrist. Well, as I see it, this is standard protocol and this is this. I'm not a psychiatrist. I don't know, right? I don't know what that kind of energy is like. One of the things I will say is that to me, when they're talking about, and they specifically just Jennifer about, well, I checked this off and I did this and I did that. I feel like this is and I don't know if industry is the right word, but it's overwhelmed, let's say. And what she's describing, almost like intake process, I'm like, yeah, this is just standard. Like nothing was shocking to me, right? Now, that being said, I've never had, knock on wood, the level of need or care looking for that Lindsay is presenting with. I mean, obviously for obvious reasons and the particular conditions that she, was dealing with, but just in general, like somebody that has this kind of many needs and isn't working well with medication, this, that, and the other. I'm, more like, okay, well, here we go. Boom, boom, boom. You're good. Right. And so I take that into consideration, and I don't want to sit here and sound like, well, my experience was this, and so therefore everybody should be this way. I don't think that way at all. But to me, listening to it, I was like, oh, well, this is just standard protocol, but it's also what happens when you meet an outlier. And it's almost like this, like, how they say like school is made for somebody who's in the middle here, not and I don't know what the proper words are these days, but when I was growing up, it was like they called them gifted, right? And then it was the middle ground, and then other people who might have some, hard time keeping up with their class and that kind of stuff, right? And school is made for this, but if you are on the outside of that, you're going to get kind of left behind, okay? Well, I also feel like that's essentially what's being put on the table for examination in this trial, is how this is done, where it's like, yep, we're trying to fit something that can't be fit into, say, a template or a form, and we're seeing the results of that. Now, again, I haven't made my mind up yet of like, oh, I think this happened, and oh, this specific doctor did this, and this one did that, and bop, 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 bop. It does sound like an utter conundrum of prescriptions and doctor visits and this and that, and I'm just like, whoa. One comment I made today, listening to the other providers that got on the stand today, is I was like, I would love to know what the jury is saying, because at this point I'm like, this is so cumbersome with the timeline and the prescriptions, and this didn't work, so we did this. It sounds overwhelming, okay, to just a random person like me listening to her, where it's like, yeah, this is a lot of drugs, and this is a lot of this and a lot of that. And it sounds like this is someone, meaning Lindsay, that needed to be an intensive, and I don't know if psychotherapy is the word for it, but basically what I'm trying to say is you're going to a psychologist and talking through stuff probably multiple times a week. Now, again, I'm not trying to sit here and live in their wallet and their pocketbook and say they could have afforded this and they could have done that. I don't know, right? And I know that that could be cost prohibitive. That's very expensive and whatnot. Maybe you can find, different things, whatever. But listening to it, I'm like, it seems that her care seemed to lack that, of this grounded individual that she could go to and be away from everything and just express these thoughts and feelings. And she did that a little bit, but it doesn't sound like to the extent that she needed to be doing it in combination with the amount of drugs that she's being prescribed and the issues that she's presenting with. But again, I'm not a doctor, so I don't know. I'm just kind of looking at things through my own lens, as well as the jury. I like to watch these cases and kind of think in the way of like, if I'm on the jury, this is what I'm thinking, right? And I look at it from both sides. Well, if the state's trying to win their case, why aren't they saying this and why are they doing this? And the defense is trying to sell me his case. Well, why is he not mentioning that? And why is he not mentioning this? So you see what I'm saying? And their technique and their tactic and all the things. So that being said, what did you think of Dr. Tufts' testimony from the state and the defense? What were your thoughts? Are you like, oh, she's losing her license? Or did you think she's like, no, this is standard protocol, she held her own? I want to know down in the comment section below. While you are down there, if you could drop off some little sofas for myself, Roscoe and Spirit, Bo and Luke, who are being very kind and quiet and sleepy, and you, the Sofa Squad, the most important, because you make the sofa possible. It would not be here without you, and I am greatly appreciative of it. Now, until we hang out in that comment section and do all the stuff we just talked about, I'll see y'all soon.